Hello. Hello. Hi. Hello, everybody. Hello, smiling faces. Hello to Antoine Vallin's 19th century painting, Mound of Butter. What a lovely surprise for your key art, Hannah, that actually the mysterious skeleton was holding a mound of butter and 2 eggs. You heard it here first, folks. You heard it here first. What can I say? Hi everyone, welcome. So, welcome to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on a Friday, 9 p.m. in England, Albuquerque, question mark, time, Sao Paulo, question mark, time. This is not my normal fare. Thank you so much for everybody who has their notifications on, who were like, what is happening? Meme chart in chat says normal time for everyone involved. So true. It is remarkably special to just sort of have with us here today in our impromptu quick afternoon stream some old and new friends. If I am a new friend to you, a delicious friend, my name is Kat Brewster. In a past life, I was a games journalist, and they keep pulling me back in. I currently work at the University of Michigan as an academic. Never the twain shall meet. But I want to welcome the fabulous crew from Failbetter Games. So we have Bruno Diaz, creative lead on Fallen London at Failbetter. And we have Hannah Flynn. We're like the Brady Bunch. We have Hannah Flynn here, who's the communications director at Failbetter. We have Mark Diaz-Truman and Brendan Conway, the CEO of Magpie Games and lead designer for the upcoming Fallen London TTRPG, respectively. Yay! Hooray! So we are all gathered here today to have a chat. We are gathered here today to have a chat about Failbetter's very exciting 15th anniversary project, which is a tabletop role-playing game coming to a hand near you in 2025. So for those of you who don't know, Fallen London is again, 15-year-old browser-based game, still going strong. I recommend you go to fallenlondon.com right now to play it, where you get to explore perpetually 1899 London after it was stolen by bats and fell into the earth beneath. And you might be familiar with Failbetter's other works like Sunless Seas or Sunless Skies, which I played a bit on stream, and according to my playtime in my Steam library, has 146 hours of playtime. So that's cool for me personally. And Mask of the Rose as well, which we played a little bit of on stream. And Failbetter are going to be collaborating with Magpie Games, whose work you might know from adapting, this is very exciting for me, Cole Wehrle's Root, and Avatar: The Last Airbender in a fun series to TTRPGs. They are no stranger to adaptation. And they will be making a TTRPG as longtime fans of Failbetter Games' Fallen London with a full suite of complementary Fallen London like sets and products and companions and things like that, including dice, which for the dice nerds among you is very exciting. And so I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to read this paragraph from the press release, Hannah, that you emailed to me about the RPG. And then I'll tell you a little bit about like what we're doing here today. I'll pass it over to Hannah and we'll just have a lot of fun. Okay. I'm going to do my press release voice now. In Fallen London, the role-playing game, players create their own characters by drawing on factions, archetypes, and settings of the city's cutthroats, socialites, radicals, academics, and other stranger creatures. They are brought together by a shared ambition, a nearly unachievable goal. Such ambitions may destroy or drive mad, or may drive mad those who pursue them, or they may change London forever. The heart, as they say, is Destiny's Engine. So that was my press release voice. So I've been tasked with hosting today's affair, which I will always do for my friends at Failbetter. And that's going to include fielding some questions that went to Failbetter's Discord server about the upcoming game, about TTRPGs, about Fallen London, whatever it may be. And I'm going to try and keep track of any questions that may come up in chat as well. I think we are going to try and have questions about things like Failbetter, Magpie, adaptation, RPGs, what mysteries may be lying inside the sun, where it is, anything else. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Hannah to say anything that I may have missed, to hear Hannah's own PR voice, and then we'll head into some questions.
I'm Hannah. I'm from Failbetter. No sound.
There we go. You're good now.
I'm good now.
I had to cut the riffraff out, but you're good to go.
You can hear me now. Excellent. So I was just thanking you all for being here. So you can enjoy hearing that twice, not hearing it once. I've been working on Fallen London for 10 years. Fallen London is, as we say, approaching 15 years old. It'll be 15th of January. And for approximately 14.99 years, people have been asking us, TTRPG, when? Tabletop role-playing, scenario, solution, massive book, basically, is what people have been asking us for more than a decade, for a long-ass time. And the project at hand is the eventual eruption of ruminations that we have been having with Magpie for some time, that we had initially had conversations with them in 2020, quite a while ago, and then things being as they were at that time, we did not achieve escape velocity at that point. And then, of course, they went on to a phenomenally successful, massive Avatar adaptation, hugely successful and wonderful. And we were watching and waiting and hoping and kind of desperate to kind of get back in touch with people. And then after we launched Mask of the Rose last summer, my thoughts immediately, as the kind of comms and marketing and community person at Failbetter, snapped onto the fact that the 15th birthday was coming up. And I just said to everyone, look, it's time that we really tried again. It's time that we made this thing happen. And we went straight back to Magpie, hoping that it would be a good moment to reignite that initial conversation. And it was. And here we are, some many months later, finally able to talk about it fully and to take all the questions from the last few weeks that people have been leaving on our Discord, and to really get into the nitty-gritty, because obviously people don't know too much about it yet. So I'm extremely and extraordinarily excited for that. And it's a rare opportunity as well for our community to talk directly to me and Bruno in person. They usually only get us on Discord. So this is it. If you have burning questions, now's your opportunity. But if it's about lore spoilers, you can simply knock. Like, we are not going to get it out of there. All the game is
I only sometimes go into the Discord to like jump scare the players. I don't answer questions they want answered.
You should start asking them questions. Exceptional.
It will only make us worse. What questions you ask us about stuff that we can't answer, it's going to get worse for you. So that's the promise and the threat.
So I've got some questions here on this very handy-dandy Trello board from Failbetter. And if you have a question in chat, some folks have they invented their own system, and I love it, which is that you write the word question in all caps, followed by your question. And if I see it, which I will try to do, I'm copying and pasting it and putting it in my own little note doc over here. So I will try and make sure that we get to questions. Some of them might get bundled up into other people's questions and things like that. So we'll try and just hit as many broad strokes as possible. But I'm going to start out with a little softball question, which is a contextual question that I hope everyone can kind of shed some light on. I'd love to hear from Magpie as well. We heard a bit from Hannah, but I would love to hear from your end. And Bruno, what was it like for you for this project to sort of come about on your end of things?
Mark, do you want to start?
Yeah,
Mark, you're
totally.
unmuted.
Yep. I'm here. So the irony of this is that when we first started talking about it, as Hannah kind of alluded to, it wasn't the 15th anniversary, right? We've been talking about this for a while. And part of what we love about Fallen London is that it's a really, I mean, people say all the time, it's a rich setting or something like that, right? It's like it's a rich setting. It has 4 fantasy species, right? But what we like is this rich setting of overlapping political priorities and overlapping interests and overlapping ideas about like what characters might want. And one of the things we talk about a lot at Magpie is this idea that when you start playing a role-playing game, a lot of the times your characters, still being formed. You just made this person. You don't know what they want yet entirely, and there's some moment, maybe it's session 5, maybe it's session 20, maybe it's the middle of session 1, where you go from being something that's acted upon by the game master, the DM throwing things at you, to somebody who's like, wait a second, no, I want X. I am an agent in this story. I am a main character, sir. And they go out and they do things. And what's super exciting about Fallen London is that the game is basically built from the ground up to be exactly that. It's I want to go do these things in this super cool, really interesting place filled with really cool, interesting people. And some of those things might degrade and destroy my very essence and soul, but damn it, I want them, right? And so when I started talking to Chris Gardner, who's a friend of mine through a different tabletop RPG channel of just us hanging out and playing TTRPGs, and he was like, "Have you ever thought about doing something like this?" We were like, "Yes, absolutely. That sounds incredible. This is so cool." I too have hundreds of hours logged on Sunless Seas for me, but many, many hours spent trying to navigate the Z. And I was like, "Yes, that would be incredible." And then, as Hannah alluded, Avatar kind of got in the way, and we were like, okay, we can't do both of these things and do them realistically. But as we wrapped up Avatar and Hannah came back, we were like, this is exactly the kind of work we want to be doing. And one of the challenges for Magpie as a studio, like if you're not familiar with us, so we're about 10, almost 15 years old as well, and we have been spending a lot of our time making weird indie games and big licenses and everything in between. We have a really, really diverse catalog for everything from, like you said, Avatar, which is a major property owned by Paramount, all the way down to things like Cartel, which is my game of Mexican narco fiction, or Apillion, which is a game about baby dragons, right? Like, so like this is like we can't be on Disney Plus. There's no way that we would fit in any one channel. Like this doesn't make any sense. But it's because we really love games, and especially role-playing games, and we're always looking for interesting challenges for us as designers and interesting products for us as publishers. And when we say we're a publisher, we're kind of more like a design studio than a publisher in the sense that everything we do has our fingerprints all over it. We don't ever just like pick up somebody's game and publish it. Like we are always working with people to make their games truly great in terms of play. And so for us, we look at Fallen London as one of those projects that maybe 5 or 10 years ago we wouldn't have been able to do at the scale that we can do it here. But what's really exciting about the project is that we have experiences not just with Paramount, but also with Leader Games for Root of working with other game designers. And so part of what is so cool about this is we're getting a chance to talk with Bruno about, well, what could make this work in the world? Like this is the kind of things we want to do. What do we need to do to make it work? And we don't have to explain that make it work means allow the players to build on it and create their own nonsense and drama and challenges because Bruno already gets that. Like he's totally already understands that, right? And so working with other game designers is just like this super sweet, amazing experience of being able to work with people who really understand what we do and who are excited to branch off from the main Fallen London experience, which has already got several branches, right? I mean, Sunless Sea and Sunless Skies and Mask of the Rose aren't really the same kind of experience, but like another branch that's very open-ended, right? And if it's okay with you, Kat, I'd love for Brendan to talk a little bit about like what that frame looks like because I think that is one of our biggest challenges when we sat down to talk about it was okay, Fallen London, you're playing one person who's like infinitely capable and can adapt to whatever storyline makes sense for you in the moment. What are we doing? And I don't know, Brendan, if you want to pick it up and talk about what are we doing?
Yeah, sure. So obviously one of the first things that we looked at is what are the things we can do in the tabletop version that everybody's been clamoring for or hoping for. And so one of those biggest things is playing together as a group, actively side by side in the exact same story as an equivalent cast of protagonists. So that's what we're aimed at first and foremost. We have a structure where you've all come together to form a concern, and that concern has a grand ambition, some absolutely over the top goal that you are attempting to achieve. There is no clear path to achieve it. You're going to have to find your way there. But all of you want this thing. There's also going to be an NPC principal in charge of the concern that's sort of going to be your boss, but we anticipate they're going to dip in, dip out, periodically give you resources, maybe often make your life harder. You're doing most of the legwork. They have other much more important things to do. So it's all about you and your little crew trying to achieve this great ambition. That doesn't mean you love each other. That doesn't mean you're a perfect family. That's, we're getting along great. It means that you're these oddball characters who all want this thing, but you have your own obsessions, you have your own ambitions, you have your own reasons for wanting this thing. So you're going to be at odds with each other just as often as you're working in perfect concert and harmony. We want to support the full sense of playing an ensemble cast where no one of you is the single main character of the story, because all of you have an equal role. And we want to see those moments where you actually bounce off each other and you say, well, I want this and I want this, and how do we resolve that? And what kind of tension and drama can that create in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, what's been sort of fascinating about this process for me is like, obviously, every time we do a new thing with the IP, we get to do like a different lens on it. Like obviously Sunless Sea, that was before my time in the company, but Sunless Sea is the survival game lens from Fallen London. Mask of the Rose, like reframes the game all the way down to the street level. You're not this omnicompetent polymath, you're just a guy and you're trying to survive in the aftermath of something terrible. And so with the tabletop game, we can think about, more social play with having that shared experience at the table. We can think about all the things that you can do in a tabletop setting that are really, really difficult or impossible to do in a video game setting, unless you're Larian, I guess. But for normal people, it's really, really challenging. We can think about all the sort of options and reactivity and interactivity that we don't really have available to us in like a mainline game, but that are very easy plausible for us to do on a tabletop game. And the other sort of flip side to that is just thinking about sort of like the different constraints and limitations that you have in a tabletop game that we don't have. Like start thinking about, so you're gonna like stamp this thing on like the corpses of trees, right? Like, and the book can only be so big. Like if it gets too big, it becomes like a deadly weapon. Is it like a legal issue? Like so there's this like really fascinating like back and forth of just like negotiating how you're going to like draw a path to make a thing that feels like Fallen London but can exist in that completely new, completely different format. What are the things that and this kind of ties into all the work that I've been doing is just sort of like trying to define what are some of the pillars of Fallen London? What are the things that make Fallen London what it is? And how do we define that? How do we explain that to people who are new to like writing or working with the franchise? The franchise. Let's see. That's
Well, but you
corporate
Fallen franchise.
Yeah,
no,
Oh,
Bruno,
no.
I really want to lean into that that tension that you bring up there at the end, which ties into some questions that folks have been asking and kind of tie into, Brendan, especially some of the things that, you were bringing up, and Mark, that you were bringing up about like mechanically how you get across like the vibe, what Fallen London feels like. And so I would be curious, could you expand a little bit on the kinds of moods, the themes, what you are trying to evoke for this particular kind of TTRPG, right? Like if you were to make a playlist that people would play when they're playing the Fallen London RPG at home, what would you title that playlist? Let's think about it in that, how we would tie it up together.
I mean, I'm sure we all have different answers, but I think for me, partially it is bad decisions made with loving care, right? Is kind of the thing, right? And I think part of what we talk about with TTRPGs in general is the things they do well and the things they do poorly are fairly well known, right? One of the things they do well, I think, is social conversations, because real social conversations are deeply open-ended. And so you're never, I pity every video game designer who has to think about, but what will people want to say? Like, and then try to plan all of those things and then say, I got to get these branches. Like, I don't have to think about that. You say whatever you say and we're going to go where we go. But the things that TTRPGs sometimes don't do well is like tactical stuff, right? Where we're trying to turn this social conversation into a bunch of tactical moves, or things where we're really, really, really specific about only being allowed to do 2 or 3 things, and players immediately choose fourth thing and become deeply committed to it, right? And so when I think about for the Fallen London tabletop RPG, I want people to really be able to embrace their characters and their flaws and their drives, not from like a play to lose perspective of wanting to just make trouble, but like really with their whole heart wanting to like discover this ancient god and get the power they need to bring a loved one back to life who is really truly dead, right? And everything along the way are these terrible decisions that cost you these pieces of your soul and your friendships and your ideals until you get to the end. And every one of those decisions you've made because you were like, no, that is what I want. I am willing to make this. And for me as a GM, when I'm running games, I'm always so interested in the moment where people are like, nope, too far. Can't do it. Got to find another way, right? Because that contrast between what I'm willing to give up and what I'm not quite willing to give up yet, but come back to me in 3 sessions, that's where I think the Fallen London game is going to be really interesting. And I know, Brendan, we talked a little bit about kind of obsessions as being key to the game. So I don't know I suspect that might be a word in your playlist title.
I mean, I'm fine just calling that the entire playlist Obsessions by Brendan Conway. We really want to play into this theme of obsession as one of the core concepts for who these characters are and what the common thing between them is, because even though they can be wildly different in so many other respects, the point is these are all characters who really want something to a point that is almost certainly bad for them. And the game is about this striving towards those things, and slowly but surely, whether by choice or just by attrition, losing or at least questioning, eroding the things that make them them and the things that expand their life beyond just that pure pursuit of obsession. In some ways, it's sort of taking a parallel to a classic, we seek gold and experience points, and saying, okay, well, let's talk about a character who has a life and has friends and does things, and then they seek gold and experience points to the exclusion of all else. And what do they become? And how far are they really willing to go? Except, of course, in our case, it's not going to be gold and experience points. It's going to be, based on the chat, some sort of buttery tentacle or something. The obsession is going to be a functional mechanic throughout the entire game for all of these characters, with them guiding you towards these terrible decisions, because we regularly see players who exist in sort of these two overarching spaces. One is completely comfortable flinging their character into a hole to see what will happen, and the other is trying to play carefully and tactically and cleverly, trying to use the tools they have to achieve their ends in the most effective fashion. And we want to basically create a structure that can bring them both together to make awful decisions and do terrible things.
Yeah, I really think of this as like, I always go back to the tagline for Sunless Sea, which, because it was like my email signature whenever I answered like a support question via Zendesk for a long time, which is every email ended with, Sunless Sea, go mad, eat your crew, die. Like,
and then do it again. Try it again, right?
Yeah.
Like after, yeah.
I think of this game as like linking arms together and jumping into the well together. Because Fallen London has like 3, what I think of as thematic pillars, which are desire, self-destruction, and rules and rule breakers. Then obviously, like, desire and self-destruction are the true flip sides of this idea of obsession, right? We had this one option that you could take in Estival recently that players went bananas for, which was push away past the tigers, and the option clearly states to the player, if you do this, you will die. Tons of people clicked it, went directly into the tiger's awaiting maw. And so, that's kind of like central to the idea of Fallen London, is cultivating this sense of, you really, really shouldn't, but come on. I think the narrative voice in Fallen Letters being kind of like Jeeves to the player's rooster. I want to jump into that. Well, very well, sir. I want to, go out to Z and go mad and eat my crew. Very well, sir. The game sort of like yes ands the player's like worst impulses. And I think that's going to be like really fantastic because like that's already like that's something that I like to GM. Like that's always been like always wanted my players at the table to be the absolute worst version of themselves, because that's like just simply the most refined experience at any role-playing table, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the number one feeling that I get when playing anything Fallen London, anything Failbetter, is this sinking sense of suddenly realizing I'm in too deep. So might as well keep going. Might as well commit. Hannah, what would you name your playlist for this?
Please, please, please let me get what I want.
Fantastic. That's that new
just
espresso.
Hours and hours of Morrissey. Just oh,
we went in different
gonna
directions.
do it. God no. Sabrina Carpenter, good lord. God bless her. But
she's so little. What can I say?
She wouldn't last a day.
No, God, no. Eaten whole. So we have sort of danced around teasing at some of the mechanical characteristics, shall we say, of the game itself. Some speculation on what the game might be powered by. So I would be really curious to hear from y'all before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of like the wheres and whens of 1899s. We are, in the game itself. I'd love to know a little bit more about the mechanics. And I think someone called it, what have you felt has been your mechanical guiding star here? I love this idea of obsession too. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about that.
So what I would call out is that most of our work so far has been in the Powered by the Apocalypse framework. And so that's probably where most of this question is coming from is this another PBTA game or why is it not? So explicitly, we're moving outside of the PBTA framework and we're going to be trying something new. And that's because we love that framework. We love everything it does. We have spent so much time with it, and we now are sort of saying, what other stories can we tell and how can we tell them outside of what that framework provides? And in particular, one of the big things that we're interested in here is a mode of play that's a little bit less reactive. As Mark said earlier on, it's this idea that a lot of PBTA functions around the GM saying, ninjas have come in through the window. What do you do? And you do something. And then I say, okay, but that starts a fire. What do you do now? And this endless reactivity, which creates this fun, propulsive storytelling that's action-filled, that's interesting and exciting, and things keep snowballing. But it doesn't really give a lot of time for slower stories or for a longer build because things keep happening. Because when we try to slow down and take this pause, inevitably the game wants the GM to say, right, but then the ninjas show up again and cause more problems. So we want to focus more on this kind of game that allows for this slower, longer term storytelling, that allows for this sort of progression of things to get slowly and steadily worse, but also that makes it more about what the PCs are after. So it's not to say there won't be this element of you being acted upon at all. We still fully intend to focus on mechanics on the GM side that allow you to sort of talk about what are other groups in the city doing. Almost certainly there are other entities that are interested in the same ambition you've chosen, and they would maybe like to get there first, and they would also maybe like to stop you, and so on and so forth. So there's going to be some of that stuff going on where you'll have to deal with other parties acting. But as a core structure, we want your concern to say, what are we after? Which opportunities are we trying to capitalize on right now? What things are we going after? We have a menu of things that we can do. We're not going to be able to do all of it. So which things are we actually picking in a way that's a little bit less, okay, but this problem's right in front of us and everything's on fire and we have to deal with it right now.
Yeah, I
have
say
like
that.
an anecdote.
Oh, please go ahead, Bruno. Yeah.
Yeah, I have like a little anecdote that there was a question on the Trello about, what is like your favorite sort of TTRPG story that I think sort of illustrates this PBTA sort of attitude, which is that this was a game that I was running many, many years ago. And this is like first session, first scene. The players have just gone through their like basic sort of ramping up of like, hey, this is my character. This is how my character knows the other characters. This is like the basic premise, and this is what the story is going to be about, and so on. And so I started the question. I'm like, okay, I just turned to like a random player. I'm like, okay, you're locked in the trunk of a car. Why? And that's how that game started. And it's exactly that attitude of, throwing things at the players and hoping that they don't notice that you're making them up as you go along. Whereas there's this kind of like the reverse is the players throwing things at the GM and they're hoping that the GM will not call their bluffs.
Right. Yeah. Well, no, there's a thing there around almost in a video game style thinking about rendering, right? Like what part of the world is rendered in a TTRPG as we talk. I think one of my favorite definitions of a TTRPG lately is this idea that it's a game where all of the play happens in the conversation. It's the things we say become part of the game. So if we're playing Root the board game and I say, I, the Marquise de Cat, would like you, the Woodland Alliance, to thrive. So I promise I won't attack you. We're all like, cool, yeah, okay, yeah, well, that doesn't mean anything. You didn't take your turn, you didn't do anything. But if I am playing the GM in the game and I, the Marquise de Cat, have said this, and now you say, well, are they telling the truth? And we're like, now we're playing, right? It's not just cheap talk. The talk is the game. And when we render the world in Powered by the Apocalypse, what's so powerful about it is we usually only render the circle immediately around you. Whatever's happening in the room you're in is the thing that's being rendered, right? And the problem is Fall London's already beautifully rendered. Like the London is already rendered. We know what's going on outside of it. We know how big the Z can be. We understand like all these pieces and places are places that people can go. And what's interesting about them, and this is a little bit counterintuitive, is that it doesn't really matter if the players want that thing to matter. Right, the masters matter even if the players don't want them to matter. Right now, the players can say, of course, like, I don't want our story to be about masters, and everybody can be like, okay, cool, we'll try to stay away from that. But it's kind of hard to stay away from if that's a central pillar of the setting and how the setting works and what the choices are and the rules and rule breakers, like you said, bro, that people are dealing with. So some of what we're looking at is how do we create a space where something can matter, a cultural touchstone, a norm, an institution, an organization, a set of beliefs inside your character, and they won't change from scene to scene to scene, but actually retain some consistency. And so when I look at something like one of the things we always use for Power by the Apocalypse is Battlestar Galactica, right? Like, because every Battlestar Galactica episode, like anything could happen, right? Like anything could happen. We're looking at other kinds of fiction where maybe it's not that anything could happen, but that the conflicts that are driving the story are so deep and rich and interesting that we still really care about them, right? And so those two kind of tones, right, are places where we feel like there are not a lot of RPGs that successfully offer the latter, right? And there are a lot of RPGs that have tried to do what PBTA does, and I don't know if there's anything that does it as well. But our goal is to grow from all those lessons we've learned about making things feel immediate and important and grow them into this space of how do we make the world also feel like a compelling part of that story.
It also feels very thematic to just like let players drive the bus a little more. Because again, if the idea is self-destruction, it's self-destruction. They have to be creating their own problems. And they have to, you pick this path, right? And if the players are spending all of their time reacting, they're not really.
Well, that's, you said, Hannah, you said at the beginning, like, I should feel like I'm always in over my head, or, Kat, you mentioned always in over my head. I think what's great about this pitch as we started talking about, well, what would we do for Fall London? I think Brett and I were immediately like, a concern. You should get like a letter, or there should be like, it should be a capital C, right? What makes me think of why it works so well is this sense of, so we're starting the game, very first scene in the game, you are literally signing your name to a piece of paper that might spell your doom. You in over your head yet? Like that's scene one. So we're not like spending 15 scenes to get you to a place where you might be in trouble. There is somebody you probably shouldn't be doing business with and other people you don't really trust, and you have now all signed a metaphysical contract to get this thing done that you probably shouldn't even want to do to begin with.
So it sounds like where PBTA is kind of like a roller coaster. Instead, here we're looking at a sinking sense of creeping dread as it marches along.
it's a haunted corn maze. No, I mean I think like haunted house stuff is always loaded because nothing in the haunted house is real, right? But I think that yeah, like we're exploring the space of like it's not just a roller coaster that's filled with thrills. It's a genuine sense of like if you fall in love, maybe you fall in love for real. And that's not a thing that disappears the next day. And in fact, the worst part of it is that it's real. It's not something you can just walk away from because then when that person is in trouble, you are actually compelled by the mechanics and by your understanding of your character and by the GM's understanding of your character to follow through on it, right?
If you die in the game.
You die in real
You
life.
die for real.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, not in this game because you'll come back. So a good thing we're testing it out with this game.
Yeah, death is fine. You can do plenty.
If PBTA is like a roller coaster, this game is more like the dodgy guy at the beach being like, "Do you want to rent a jet ski?"
So
I'd love to know. I mean, it sounds like you guys are, and I think so. One of the questions that has just popped up in chat from Where Thighs, is thinking about like these broad strokes and senses and feelings about development and about the mechanics. But I think folks are also a little curious to hear about where you are in development with this system and kind of maybe a hint of what those mechanics might look like in the small and the micro and not just the macro. I don't know. Do you guys have thoughts about that?
Yeah, so we've been putting these together for a while, but part of the nature of this process is we need to throw them in front of people. We need to hit it with hammers as much as possible. We need to figure out where the weak parts are. We need to adjust things. And that ranges from all manner of issue, like just pure probability and math, to narrative, to tone, to the emotionality, to what's just plain fun. So there's a lot here where I can describe everything we've sort of written down so far, but it all exists still in the state of like, we really want to make this system excellent to play and capable of honoring the 15 years of Fall in London. Like, we really want to be able to make this system represent that well and wonderfully at your table. So we're going to be hammering it hard as we move forward. So with all of that said, we have some core mechanics about, just how your general roll will go. We're going to likely use just D6s. They are nice and simple for probability's sake, and they make really nice dice when we work with dice makers to make them. We're going to have a system so that you assemble your roll in the moment based on your circumstances. So you're going to get some additional dice. For instance, if you have equipment or resources that are of use in that moment, we're going to allow you to get some additional dice if you have some sort of positive position that puts you in a stronger stance compared to everybody else, that gives you an advantage. And you're going to have your skills, but we've adjusted the way skills work in the game to more be about flattening out the chance than about just straight up giving you the opportunity for enormous success. So it's the concept that when you're really, really skilled, often what that actually translates to is you stop making some of the simplest mistakes. You're more consistent. You're more capable of doing it on a regular basis. So our skill system is more about creating that kind of consistency than creating massive wild heights where my skill gives me 8 additional dice. That part is the obsession dice, where we're sort of planning on the obsessions being the thing that dump a bunch of dice into your pool with potentially awful side effects if they come out with the wrong results. But your skills should be there to actually make you feel a little bit safer so that you're like, well, I'm actually really good at this. So I can be relatively confident this thing is going to go my way. We're still going to be incorporating a general sense of the multiple categories of success, partial success, including mitigated effects, costs, consequences, so that you don't just get everything every time. But we're also going to include upper levels of success so that you have these triumphant successes that are surprising when you roll particularly well and you get some really good results. Generally, right now, we're aimed at a system where you're looking for 5s and 6s because that works with the probabilities of the overall numbers that we're dealing with. And our dice pools are a little bit smaller until you add in those crazy obsession dice pools, and then that blows out like crazy. But the big thing, I think, just to really emphasize is we have all of this. We're going to be playtesting it. but we're reserving the right to say any given piece of this, if it turns out that it's really not working, as we've tried it so far, as we've played around with it so far, and as we continue to put it before more and more people, we're going to discover things that are surprising. That skill list and the specific words and ideas that it encompasses, that is going to be one of the hardest and most important things that we're going to work on, because it has to be this perfect union of the word that captures the concept and the concept that represents itself in play. So I want to be clear that we've done a bunch of work and we're really happy with it. And also we have this but we really have to do this well. And we've really got to keep working on this and hammering it out. So we're going to do it.
I mean, one of the things I've always really valued about the way that Failbetter and, approaches collaborations and all development is a really transparent development process. And I think this just shows to go that this is, part of the way that works. And I will say that as soon as you said dice and D6, everyone in chat was just very excited to hear about dice. So you hit the nail on the head there, my friend. 10 out of 10.
Well,
Mark, do you want to add on to that?
I just want to be clear, I'm going to be pushing for my dice with the correspondence sigils that'll, burn your eyebrows. So that's my pitch. Not approved yet.
D6, so that's fine. Like we can put 6 correspondence on one die, and that's cool. If it was like a 7 or up situation, we'd be in some correspondence trouble.
Yeah, that's why the dice don't go above 6s. You couldn't.
Exactly. Players should not look directly at the dice.
Kiss your fringe, kiss your bangs goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that one of the things that we've learned from Powered by the Apocalypse in just as having done, it's funny, I mean, we've been doing about 10 years of Powered by the Apocalypse design from about 2013, 2014 to today. And halfway through that time period, we started talking about some of this stuff where we said, look, there's some things we're trying to develop. Like I tried to develop a sort of sci-fi Star Trek game and just really struggled because PBTA is so chaotic that like having any institution exploring space didn't work, right? And so we were like, well, why? And discovering, oh, that chaos. It's like opening a box and be like, where? Put all these snakes in this box. Oh yeah, those snakes are what drive the engine of PBTA. That makes a lot of sense. One of the things we've discovered with PBTA that people do struggle with a little bit is that the system works best when you're a little rigid, meaning you got to do the moves. Every move, you have to do it, and you have to do it in full. And that is incredible. It unlocks this kind of specificity to the story that's super, super powerful, but it can be tough for people to like adhere to. And what we see a lot, for example, on streaming is people just be like, well, just roll the dice, and if they're high, it'll be good. And we're like, I mean, fine. I guess you can make it work, but you're kind of saying poetry is about just putting words. Don't use punctuation. Don't think about the meter. Just put it on there. And you're like, yeah, you can. Well, like the beauty of a sonnet is its structure, not just its words. And so I think one of the things we want to do here is have a system that has a little bit less rigidity at the front, right? So that if you're like, cool, I put together my dice pool and I roll and I get this many successes, and that tells me it's a mid-tier success. And getting to some of those same outcomes as PBTA of like, you get what you want, but at a cost, or wow, somehow you pulled it out, or it's a miss, but you're actually excited for a miss because now the GM is going to say something cool. We want to get that with maybe a little less rigidity up front. And instead to use what we've learned about PBTA's ability to structure a story to really develop conflicts in more depth. And I don't know, Brendan, if you're up for talking about it, but the second half of the equation is as much as every individual moment can be resolved with just, hey, let's throw some dice and be done. The other side of it is when we get to a conflict, this new system really gives a different kind of approach.
This is the part where my little gearhead brain explodes with excitement about what we're doing here. Because the thing we want to do is have this set of conflicts that fit different arenas, fit different particular problems and moments that can really blow those moments out into fully fledged, essentially mini games, where you are going to be making a bunch of choices and moves inside of its own little system that then spits you back out into wider play with a significant variety of different outcomes, such that you've arrived at a completely different situation from the conflict than you ever would have if you just simply rolled the dice. The conflict is going to create tension while you play through it, but it's also going to create these massively interesting results as you get back into the story. So the idea here is that using the conflicts, we can highlight important parts of the story, things that are relevant to the overall tone of the game, saying, these things are all of equal importance. At the table, you might be able to say, this is not a particularly huge moment. We're not super concerned with this chase scene. We can resolve it in a single die roll. Let's not go to the conflict, because it will take more time to dip into this system and dip back out. But if we're in that moment, we're really excited, we want to know, how's this going to go? This is a really important moment. Let's go to the conflict for chases and run through this entire sequence, have this exciting experience, and then spit back out. And so we can do some of the classic things we've seen all over in RPGs. We can do chases, for example, and obviously people will default to thinking of a combat system as a kind of conflict. And we're probably going to break that apart into things that actually match the tone that we're interested in, that have maybe a bit more resonance to the particulars of what violence and combat look like in Fallen London. But we're also going to include lots of other kinds of conflicts, like social conflicts, attempts to persuade somebody of your opinion, attempts to put on a good show in a high society kind of setting. I personally have had a hankering to have some sort of conflict that can represent a ballroom dance and seduction, and I've wanted that for a long time. So that's on my to-do list.
It's so crucial for us, and one of the first things that came up in our, internally when we were drafting, like, well, okay, if this was going to exist, if we finally do get to do a TTRPG, what would be a misstep for us? And that would be valuing combat above other kinds of conflict. Like, Fallen London player characters are not above shanking one another. Cool. But it could be just like a quick stabbing in an alleyway and let's get on with it. And Magpie, we're like, yes, okay. We do need to balance that with both dancing, carousing, writing poetry, roll for meter, roll for sonnet, Could be anything, which is,
a sonnet
feels
battle.
very correct.
I love that. Yeah. I love that.
Sonnet throwdown.
So in this way, we're
Yeah.
kind of drawing upon PBTA, because we're saying the cool thing about PBTA is it says pick your conflicts, but it says do them at moment by moment. So like the irony of Cartel is it's a game about the drug war with one move for violence, because in most drug stories actually there's very little violence and a whole lot of talking, right?
Yeah.
And so here we're able to say, okay, Fallen London probably has one violence conflict. But if we're doing a military sci-fi game, maybe 3 of the 7 conflicts are violence and the other 4 are not, right? Because it fits that game. And so we're really trying to use the tools we've built over the last couple of years to think about, like, what do TTRPGs do well? What do they do poorly? And how can we innovate on those frameworks to build something that is going to broaden the kind of game that PBTA is. I think it's efficient. It's exciting. It's easy to pick up. Like, we want to keep all those things, but how do we broaden what it's capable of into something new?
I mean, and I really want to lean into and start asking some of these questions about, I mean, I love that we're talking about conflict and the diversity of conflict and how we represent conflict and all the diverse modes of conflict that we find in Fallen London extended universes and franchises. But I would also really, and I would love to ask Bruno especially, conflict does not happen in a vacuum. We need that narrative. We need that story. We need that very vibrant, rich setting that Fallen London offers. And so I kind of want to start at a sort of top level question, which is for the newbies among us, Bruno. Like, at the start of these games, what are we imagining a player should know about the setting? What would a typical playthrough kind of maybe look like in relationship to that Fallen London setting? Are they a newcomer, or are we imagining maybe a more experienced and a more informed player as far as that story is concerned?
So the basic premise of Fallen London, like, we really write it on the first screen that you see when you open the game, which is 40 years ago, London was stolen by bats. Now hell is close. Immortality is cheap, and the screaming has very linearly stopped. That's kind of the log, right? Fallen London is this game about being a weird, messed up Victorian eccentric in a world full of weird, messed up Victorian eccentrics that are all like driven by really irrational and terrible desires to shank each other, betray each other, do terrible things, and build these little internecine terrible plots. It's grounded like in Victorian fiction, which is something that is like just weirdly familiar to people. Like, everybody has seen you know, you've seen A Christmas Carol, you've seen probably, you know, you've seen a ton of Sherlock Holmes things in your life, probably like 3 or 4 different versions of it, right? But at the same time, it's grounded in just urban fiction in general, urban fantasy especially. And so it is a setting that is like, it's easy to kind of, and this is kind of like one of the challenges of a tabletop game is that in a video game, the player, because you're sort of presenting options to the player, you can sort of like sell the idea of like, how do you role play as this type of character through the options that you offer, right? In a tabletop game, you kind of have to find another way to teach people, okay, how do you actually behave? How do you act as a weird Victorian eccentric, right? How do you inhabit that mindset? Which is one of sort of the like unique challenges of like tabletop games.
It's like every book should come with a giant coat you wear and fog that emerges, right? So that you get it right.
Yeah, like the top of the bundle, like
I did see someone ask if the top hats would be required, so
oh god, there's like so much like complexity just around like hat etiquette in Victorian society. But the thing is that like our Victorian things is very skewed. It's very different from like realistic Victorian society, right? Like a running joke in Fallen is the idea that everyone is like incredibly uptight, but about things that don't matter, right? It's things like, you know, which way do you put the cream and then the jam on scones, which is something that I personally do not understand at all. The cultural significance of that, but and sort of like the comedy that emerges from the collision between, you know, everybody's like very proper and very concerned about propriety and status and class and you know how you present yourself to other people, but also there's people running around with the faces of squid, right? There's there's people who've been drowned in the river and they keep just like walking out and singing sad songs at you, and it's kind of killing the vibe. Like those sorts of interactions between the expectations of Victorianness and the weirdness of the setting are kind of like central to the comedy, which is one of the like tonal things. Like the thing that I would sort of characterize the way that Fallen London like voice comes out is that it's ping-ponging between comedy and horror, with a sprinkling of romance whenever it kind of finds its way there, right? And it's about sort of pivoting those things really quickly. So the challenge really is, and I love to see Brendan has thoughts on this, is like, how do you get like a GM to like learn how to be that person, right? How do you get players to learn how to like inhabit those types of characters?
Yeah, it is absolutely one of the deep challenges here, but it's a good challenge because there is so much to draw on and there is so much we can actually build in based on what already exists. So there are a number of things that we're going to be doing that exist at all these different levels of play because, you know, in reality, the answer to this question is no one thing. It's many things stacked on top of each other to try to get people on the same page. We want the game to be friendly to the person who has never played Fallen London before, even though we think that they should go play Fallen London immediately. But we want to be able to bring in those people. Yeah, go play it immediately.
It's
like,
free.
Just leave right now, go play.
Well, we've actually seen something interesting between Avatar and Root, where Avatar as a major media property has this weird limit where if people have never seen it, they actually run up against a wall with it. They're like, "Well, I've never seen it," and we're actually like, it would take me 7 minutes to explain to you all the things you need to know to play Avatar. Let's just go. But there's like this feeling of like, well, it feels like a lot. And actually with Root, we don't have that. People are like, it's a board game, and they're like, oh, cool. What's the setting? That's it. There's no sense of it as, oh, well, I need to absorb all this stuff. So it's really important to us that we don't fall into the trap of Fallen London being viewed as like, well, there's infinite content. So until you absorb the infinite content, you can't play the game. In reality, like just the line, it's a world where London was stolen underground by bats, and people are like, oh, that sounds awesome. Like we're like, great, cool, I'm in. Right. And so all of the tools that we're building are very familiar, I think, TTRPG tools to say, you're going to learn this setting incrementally. We're going to start with some basics. Like there's stuff you need to know because everybody would know, including your character. But like, if you want to play somebody who doesn't really understand the masters because it's never really come up, then that's cool. Like you could be that character. And if all of you are that character, that's cool too, right? Like there's so much openness because it's only your table that matters to your game. And I think, you know, when Brendan's kind of talking about creating that space, we always try to keep in mind creating that space for these 5 people, not all 5,000 people that are going to play the game this year or whatever, but these 5 people right here at this table.
I think one of the things that's most exciting to me, and I don't want to like cats remain in bags and everything, but when we're talking about making a physical book, there will be a resource for the GM. That there will be the kind of GM who they know so much about Fallen London. They've been playing it for a decade, and they have their player character, and they want to make that player character the source of the concern. So they know that person inside out, and that person has encyclopedic knowledge of the new. And then there'll be GMs who are like, this sounds interesting. I've played Thunder Sea once. That in the book, in some way, we would like to reflect what the kind of more esoteric and deeper stuff is, and separate it perhaps, so that if you're the GM, you can absolutely immerse yourself in the secrets and really take people somewhere. That if you have the book just to kind of refer to, there's a section that will always be there to kind of fuck with you. Like you could read it. You could read it and just find out everything if you wanted to. That's kind of a meta challenge for the players to ignore the secrets at the back of the book.
Well,
I'm just really excited to be making a book. Like, can we just say that as well? Like, Jesus Christ, I used to work in publishing. It's been a long time since I've been allowed to be like, yes, what finishes are we going to use? Let's talk about spot lamination. Let's talk about the dangers of printing something that's mostly black.
And whether or not you have a series of sigils in the back that betray horrible secrets, but that you can never, ever tell. I mean, I think...
Oh, wait.
I think
I'm not saying that we have been waiting for years to make a book that has secrets literally inside it, or that anybody should maybe pull apart the entire thing page by page and look for the things that might be buried somewhere inside them. I'm not saying I've been waiting for a decade to do that, but if I was, I would sign a license like Fallen London. That's the kind of thing I would do, per se.
I mean, and I think I love everything that I'm hearing, and that, an utter newbie could show up to the book and be ready to play and kind of learn what it is that they needed to know. But I'm curious, like, for the diehard Fallen London fan, like, where there is some overlap, maybe where Fallen London speaks to these games, and like what is going to be available for them in supplements and stories. A lot of people really want to know, where are we in relationship to the fall? Where are we in relationship to 1899? How many of them have there been? And maybe is there a way that we can think about where we are, both in time and in space?
I mean, initially,
everybody at once.
I was going to say, we're in London, right? So, there are many different places that you could potentially visit, but that I think we've all kind of come together to say that London is hugely rich and varied and deep in itself by itself. So whereas there may be some kind of mudlarking and zailing to some extent, this is not like Sunless Sea, the RPG, focusing on Fallen London. And if you would like to back us when it comes to crowdfunding, maybe one day we can also make a sea one and a sky one. Sorry, Bruno.
Yeah, in terms of like time frame, like the core of the game is definitely going to be what I would call like the 1899 era, which is the same time period as the main game takes place in, like very like tail end of the 19th century, like early years of the 20th century. London has been underground for a long time already. Like, people are used to the weirdness. The masters are firmly in control. Everything is going totally fine and nothing is going wrong. And the city, like the sixth city is definitely not gonna drop anytime soon. Everything is cool. In terms of like, how much detail would we expect a book to have about like the Anthracene and about this and about that and about that? Probably like just enough to contextualize London. Like, you need to talk about the Khanate as like a faction that exists in the world, but we're probably not gonna go like, these are the different districts that exist in the Khanate, and this is how we play this. Because like London is so big and you want to get it right. And again, like they're gonna like stamp this on dead trees. Like the book can really only be so big.
Well, and we've also learned that I think, our initial instinct always when we first started was like, give people as many tools as possible, we didn't really necessarily worry about, we wanted to explain those tools, but we weren't really worried about like integrating them, and people will figure it out, right? And especially as tabletop RPGs have grown and they're reaching more people and doing more things, we want to make sure that they're really well supported and that there's a lot of really good tools at every step. So when I think about something like doing the Z, right, which has its own video game that Mark personally has spent hundreds of hours playing, I would like it to have a whole book. Like that would be my ideal situation. Would be like, and here's the Z. And the nice thing about the framework that we're talking about mechanically, because again, this is what we do. Like Magpie's thing is we want to make sure it all locks together. We can swap out some of those conflicts, right? Like one of the new conflicts for going to the Z can be things like traveling from place to place, which is not really a thing we have to do in Fallen London in the same way, right? Like if you're in London, you're not going on a, usually not going on a multi-day sea journey filled with monsters, right? Like you're just trying to walk, well, I guess walk across the street is probably just as dangerous, but it's not as many days, right? And so like when we think about what we can do to expand and build on the system, it's always trying to like make sure that this is grounded and this is built and it's ready to go, and then we build on that. And so as an example of us doing this, we have a new root book coming out that's it's actually going to Kickstarter next month that is expanding root to talk about the ruins. It's been a part of the setting. We knew we didn't say enough about it. We wanted to say more. We needed more time to talk about what that looked like, and now we're able to add to it. And we really love it whenever we can push out into this next space. And as Hannah said, well, how many people are interested in this? Because if it is as big as we're excited for it to be, I think there might be some Z and Sky in the future that make the game a lot bigger for people who really like me, who are really gonna embrace that part of it.
Exceptional. I also want to be sure, while we're thinking about the things that people love so much about Fallen London and its compatriots, and a number of folks have asked about character creation, which of course is a very special part of any TTRPG, but I think it's particularly special in the Fallen London world. So I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about character creation, who we get to be, and how that may play into how and when we go mad. So anybody who has any thoughts on this would love to hear it, whether that's mechanical or sort of just thematic.
I think it was one of our priorities when we, in that initial kind of internal concepting at the beginning of the project, that we offer people the opportunity to play non-human characters. It's fundamentally something that's very hard to add into Fallen London, the browser game as it stands. So we wanted to give people a framework for that. And obviously at your table, you can kind of be who you want to be, but we do want to bake that into the character creation in some way. We are still at quite a nascent stage as to which one we're going to support. But I think we were all kind of happy to say that we are looking to include people being able to play Ratter's Favor. So imagine a bundle of rats potentially as a character, in the same way that the rats appear in Summer Skies, for example. It will need testing, but it's my fondest dream that people can be just the freakiest little guys that they want to be. Is that we can't support it, so let's put it in the TTRPG and let people have fun with it.
I want to defer to Brennan a little bit on the mechanics of that, but I think like for me as a person of color, I think one of the most important parts about the games that Magpie has made is this idea of the human and the non-human being blurred, right? So like I'm not a huge fan. Anybody's heard me talk about urban fantasy. I'm not a huge fan of monster hunting games because my history, my family, my culture is usually the one that's the monster, right? Not so much the monster hunter. So when I look at things like rubbery squid men and things like there's this feeling of otherness that like I connect with, right? And I want to see that be made personhood, right? Given that personhood. It's like when we wrote Urban Shadows, which is our, kind of stock vampire werewolf mage urban fantasy game, we 9 out of 12 playbooks are not people, right? They're the monsters because we think that's where a lot of the sizzle is for what it looks like to actually live in a city. And so one of my favorite parts about Fallen London is that understanding that all these others start off being really distant from you when you first enter the city, and then you just inevitably grow closer to them until you are one of them because you have crossed over that line. And so being able to start from the perspective of, yep, you're this other, and the TTRPG gives you the space to be like, yeah, maybe your character never talks. Like maybe you literally never talk in the game. But what you do is you say, yeah, my character like makes some noises and you understand that he's saying, I will go take care of that, right? And so like Chewbacca and Han, we can kind of always know what your character is saying because we, the audience, are also the people writing the script.
I mean, I know that a lot of players connect a lot with the Rubbery Man, but connect a lot with the Clayman. And it's just a thing that, like, you know, we've done like stories about those characters, but it never really had the opportunity to let players inhabit them. This was definitely like one of the things that was like top of the list when, you know, in very early days, I was just sort of compiling things like, what are some things that the TTRPG can do that, you know, we don't do in the main game, which, you know, obviously we're going to talk about social play, the playing like a greater breadth of characters is another component of that. And it's not just like, you know, non-human characters where, you know, you can play as a rat and you're like 4 inches tall. You can play as a rubbery man and you don't talk. You can play as a clayman and you're like, you know, gigantic and all those things. But there's also the just possibility of like, what if your character is an urchin? What if your character is actually sort of integrated in these factions in the way that the player in the main fall in the game really isn't, because you're always sort of like at a remove.
If I can't be 4 rats in a trench coat, then what's the point?
Why even bother, right?
Why?
And Brendan, can you talk a little mechanically about like why we think we have that breadth? Because I think it is unique to TTRPGs.
Well, we've been working very hard to develop the 4 rats in a trench coat mechanics,
Thank
and
you.
we think they're a long way along, and it's going to be a real improvement that from now on you're going to be able to play an ever increasing number of trench coated rats.
Every level is a new rat. Like
Every
you
level is a
level
new
up,
rat,
you add a
yes.
rat.
1 dice per rat, please.
Exactly. Yes. You see, you're getting it. The big thing we want for the character creation mechanics is we want you to be building a character who's fleshed out by picking from multiple different categories that all are adding something to the character. And just as with the dice mechanics, this is one of those things we're going to be hitting with hammers to say, are these the right categories? Are the contents of those categories the right ideas? But it is to say that you would be picking where you're from, what your profession is, who you associate with, the faction that you're a part of. You're picking all these different elements that by the time you've picked them all, firstly, just by reviewing the list, you're going to be learning a bunch about the setting. The person who's never played Fallen London before is just going to see those lists and start to come to an understanding when they see the places in the city they might have come from. But it's going to add this detail to the character in addition to mechanical effects that are adjusting what skills you have or what other resources you have. It's going to give you this sense that this is who I am. I'm from here. I do this. These are the things I'm interested in, along with a category that we want to sort of represent a unique twist. So that would be the one category that 2 different players should not pick the same entry from, so that each character has some unique element to them that makes them particularly special and adds that bit of weirdness to them that makes them distinctive. And the options for that bit of weirdness can range widely in terms of what they can do, to things that are going to be highly complicated and require additional mechanics, but they're going to be super awesome, to things like you work 2 jobs, you actually have 2 professions, you're closer to that polymath character because you do more than the average character.
I love the idea of hitting all these things with hammers. It's a great image for me. Okay, fantastic. I am trying to make sure that we're hitting all of the broad strokes in all of these questions over here. And before I move on actually to questions about the Kickstarter itself and like what we can expect from that, I kind of want to ask just one self-indulgent kind of question, which is about homebrew support and GM support and the kinds of things that you might imagine that people can take to the table themselves, and whether or not you've kind of considered this from the outset, or if maybe that's something that you're thinking about down the line. I don't know.
We have an attitude about homebrewing that's probably really different than where these people are coming from. So usually when people talk about homebrew, what they mean is that there's like this established set of rules and they're kind of making it work for their table. And that's that's not really the framework we're coming from. So I think one way we think about it is customization, right? So to what degree does this game permit a kind of customization that's going to make it work for your group? Although I think PBTA has some rigidity in it, like, no, you got to do these moves. One of the things we learned from PBTA is that it's actually really easy to build tools in that let people kind of do that design work themselves. So for example, if you really want to play a background that isn't in the game, we're going to give you really explicit tools for how to make one. We don't think that there's anything magic or special about our backgrounds that we made over your backgrounds as a Fallen London player of 15 years and the thing you want to bring to the game, right? And you can be brand new to the game and say, well, this isn't in there, but I think it should be. It's like, great, cool, figure it out, right? But you got to do the work, and that's why we try to list many backgrounds so you don't have to do that work. And so what we recognize is that we think of it as our job to make the game as awesome as possible so you don't have to do the work of making it work. So that's number one. And number two, we want to give you the explicit tools to customize it to fit your table so that you don't have to invent those tools either. And it's not saying that we don't think you can. You totally can. Absolutely. We totally. The game design is just hacking other ideas and other things you've tried until you get somewhere. But we really want to be supportive, if that makes sense. I really want people to know that if they open up the box and they plug the thing into the wall, that they're not going to get electrocuted and have to buy a whole separate thing of duct tape just to make the game work, right? And so the short version is yes, if you've got cool ideas you want to bring in. I saw somebody in the chat talking about Fallen Paris, like, yeah, like set your game in Paris. Like, that sounds great. Cool. That's the beauty of TTRPGs. Nobody, not even me, can come to your table and be like, you're doing it wrong, right? Like, you're going to have that chance to do it yourself. But our hope is that our game is doing so much work for you that you are excited to do it this way and to use those customizable tools.
Exceptional. Yeah, I saw someone say, Fallen London is can be such an overwhelming world. How can I take that as a GM and like try and guide anybody else in it? And so I do like this idea of from the outset saying anybody can open this box. It's not going to explode. I mean, maybe in a fun way, but it's not going to explode in your face. Fantastic. Okay. Does anybody else want to add anything to that and kind of thinking about homebrew and thinking about customization and thinking about support in that way?
Obviously it's like really kind of important when we have like this pre-existing fan base that is like super invested and has like really strong opinions on aspects of the lore and everything. But even for the players that are new, it's still invaluable to be able to sort of know that you have that sort of like safety net of okay, if I try to do something that's a little outside the box, I can like go and get the Legos and build my little
yes
thing to do it.
We don't want people to feel beholden to specific lore points and knowledge of history, the knowledge of factions and things, and the intricacies of the relationships between all of the matters and how many matters are there and all this, because it's just not very fun, really, is it? And unless, of course, you have an entire table of lore heads and they are just absolutely losing their marbles over doing exactly that, in which case, go for it. Like, if everyone's having fun, I'm down. But we want people to, something that the book is going to put right front and center is the tone and the mood and the vibe of Fallen London. And just giving people every possible opportunity to enjoy that and not worry too much about, like, well, you can't afford the Hesperidian cider, Yeah.
Like, which color are the, like, his amused lordship's underwear? Like, cares, frankly. Like, it's ultimately like it's your table, it's your game, and you can just sort of do what you want. Like, we are constantly just doing what we want anyway. Like, it's all made up. We've made it all up. We are constantly making more of it up.
We have a meme that Chris Gardner, our narrative director, made years ago that we repost occasionally, which is just something he said in our Slack that's like, get your piping hot bollocks here, fresh off the wagon. It's all made up, folks. Because it is. Like, we refer back, obviously, but like ultimately it's a ripe environment and not a set of strictures.
Classic Chris Gardner W. Brendan, is there anything that you wanted to add to that before we move on to maybe some Kickstarter nitty-gritty?
Yeah, just to explicitly say with regard to the part of the question about the GM tools and how it reflects on all of this, one of the most important things that we focus on for GM tools is essentially this idea of sharing that philosophy, that tone, that theme, because that's the most important thing that we can give to a GM is this sense of when I make a decision, when I say what happens next, when I create an NPC for the first time, what is the framework that is appropriate for this game for me to make those choices? Because the infinite creativity would allow you to make anything in any given game, but most games probably have a philosophy or a framework that fits that game better, that fits that setting, that style. That is a thing we are absolutely going to spend many, many pages on to make sure that we are downloading to those GMs, because even the GM might not be particularly familiar with Fallen London when they get into play. So we need to make sure that these pillars, these core ideas, these tenets and themes, the most important thing is to make sure that when you represent Fallen London, it is Fallen London. That's where we're going to put our emphasis in that book and make sure these players are supported so that they feel confident in making the call about what things to put in the game, what kinds of moves to make, what kinds of characters to meet.
Exceptional. When can I get it?
Money, just throw your money right at me, Kat. You can have it right now.
Yeah, right, exactly. If you give us your money today, then it will arrive, but it will arrive traveling backwards to the past from the future, not today. Right? That's I mean, we're planning some cool stuff. 2025 is a really incredibly important year for Fall in London, right? And we all got excited about that idea because there's something really fun about the way that Fall in London bridges what we would think of as like the out of character and the in character, right? There's something fun about the fact that there are like real holidays. Like it's what's the difference between a real holiday and a fake holiday? At some point they're the same. Like you're celebrating the day. Guess what? It's a real holiday for you now, right? Like and so like when we look at like the excitement that people have about the role Fall in London plays in their lives, we want the campaign to feel like that. So we're going to have some exciting stuff coming. We're going to have previews. We're going to have playtests. We are going to make sure that the community has lots of opportunities to get in on this and be a part of it. We do need some time to like get some stuff laid out and like, get some things finished. So I think 2025 is going to be a big year, and we'll see what we have, what we can tease before then in terms of kind of what's available and what's finished. But we are very much a measure three times, five times, cut once company, and we want to make sure that we're taking the time to get it right. So anytime that we're delayed, it's because we're making sure that it's really, really delivering on what we want it to do.
And what kind of crowdfunding support do you anticipate there potentially being? And what kind of involvement do you think fans will have in that process beyond how many holidays and rituals and excitement there may be?
So the first thing is like we always I finally trained my brain away from just literally saying Kickstarter instead of crowdfunding. Like finally, Kat, I mean, like I saw you do it too. It's like I finally got to the point where I don't just automatically say Kickstarter, which of course means that we're running a Kickstarter right now. So like I will be back in my Kickstarter mode. But like little inside baseball here. It is hard to explain how much crowdfunding has changed in the last 3 years. Like we were on Kickstarter in 2011, which was basically, I think, within the first year of being available in the games category. And Marissa, my co-founder, and I at the time, like we raised like $5,000 for our first product and thought we'd won the lottery, right? And 5 years later in 2016, we raised $1 million. 5 years after that, in 2021, we raised $10 million. So things have changed an enormous amount, and it's really hard for us, even within a year out, it's hard for us to say, well, this is definitely what we're doing, right? So I know that we're likely to go to a major crowdfunding platform, whether that be BackerKit or Kickstarter or something else. We are very likely to have opportunities for you to pick up like our usual stuff, just the PDFs. If that's all you want, you'll get them all. We have a chance to just get the book. But what we're also really excited about is we get to make some really, really cool stuff. And I know that Fallen London fans have really, really wanted some cool stuff. And I think Hannah could talk about this. It's hard to make cool stuff and not know where it's going or how it interacts with anything. So it's hard to just make dice, for example. Like, what's their purpose? What do they do? How do they go anywhere? but we are excited to make dice because those D6s have a role in the thing that we're doing. So I don't know, Hannah, if you've thought, why aren't there a million, Failbetter, Fallen London things for people to play with?
Oh my God, getting physical products off the ground post-COVID is worse. It's always been difficult for us. We've done a handful of um, we work with Gainty, who are an incredible merchandise partner that we have in the UK. It's really difficult for us usually to work with people in the US because of timey-wimey and and posting things to and fro with people who are making physical things. But this, I think, is the best and only example of us making it work, which is completely correct. Thank God. And like we did playing cards, gilt-edged playing cards for the 10th anniversary, gorgeous. But it is as the only person who at Failbetter who has physical production experience and the nous and desire to create things. I don't even work full time, gang, and that makes it about 5% of my job. So this is it. I'm getting all my dice life off of this. I'm getting my DM screen life off of this. My hardback book life is coming to me through this project. So I'm going to be beating down the postman van, chasing down the van in the street, the same as everyone else is. And I want to say I've been eating these the whole time, and they're so spicy.
Hannah's taking little pieces of paper and rubbing them against her face and saying, which is the best paper stock?
I mean, like,
yes.
One of the things that's super fun, I mean, like, there's, like, we just got in the Urban Shadows, final, it's a proof, but it's like, this is the final manufacturing copy. And I mean, we said this on the Kickstarter, so it's not a surprise. It has special UV ink that you can't see without a black light. And not just like you can't see, like, when we got the book, we expected it to be kind of like a UV wash where you can kind of tell it's there. You can't tell it's there. Like we put the flashlight on it for the first time and I was like, whoa, that's so cool. Like, we're excited about special editions and things like that. And what we have generally done, because we got to strike a balance. We don't want anybody to feel like you got to spend $500 to like do this. Like, we want it to be accessible. So we generally have the same content in both books. If we do a deluxe book, it's important to us that nobody's getting like different content. But we want to make something that you can like leave out at your house and people are like, what is this, right? And so like that sense of a book that has maybe some secrets, that has some ideas in it, where maybe we don't even tell you everything that's cool in the book, because that's very much Fall in London. That's really exciting for us, and we are kind of shifting on the production side into starting to have those conversations with our manufacturers about what's possible. And again, knowing on our side that like we could come up with a really cool setting and it would appeal to some group of people, but it wouldn't have the resonance and the history and the depth of being like, how do you guys feel about Devil Bone, and have that word like something, right?
Even in the chat tonight, the people are like, oh, would it not be Devil Bone dice? And we've got to say, like, so this is an object that exists in Fallen London Devil Bone dice. And the kind of joke of Devil Bone dice is, if you know a little bit about devils, they're not like the boniest. They don't necessarily have a skeleton.
Yeah. They have a skeleton, but it's not made out of bone.
Yeah. So what is Devil Bone made out of? And if you had some, how actually would they roll? Because I get the impression they might be a little bit kind of bouncy. But these are all questions that we have to answer. And so I think maybe the part of the dice question, since we announced and until now, has been answered in that if it's not Devil Bone dice, people will be chasing us down the street.
I'm not going to lie.
We're going to figure that one out.
The Devil Bone dice is really exciting because, like, when it comes to dice, like we like putting special faces on stuff. That's super fun. I mean, the correspondence dice sound super cool, but like that's very typical. What we have not actually had a lot of reason to do is to play with materials themselves. And so like we are super excited about that. And so there's this weird thing with RPGs and games where like obviously we spend a lot of time, Brett and I laugh about like paying our rent with words that came out of our heads. Like they just like it's weird. It's weird. But like there's the other part of it where we're like, okay, so is this book 304 pages or 320? Because pages, signatures are 16 pages, so it's one or the other. Which one you want? And like, there's this physical dead tree component that can be honestly really, really frustrating when you just want 321 pages, but can also be really amazing when you find this connection where the game and the materials and the thing all click, right? And you pick up like the deluxe root set, which is this amazing artifact that Miguel made that has this foil stamped cover, and you're like, somehow this feels cooler just to have this piece and the feel of it and everything there. It's a very unique thing to games.
Yes, Reaper from the Abyss in chat actually even, I think, summed it up by saying, coffee table book, no, TTRPG nerd trap lures. And it sounds like...
Exactly. Yeah,
If
I
you buy
have
the
a
book
friend.
and all they do is read it, love it.
Yeah, love it,
Just
love
read
it.
it.
But there's a joke that we have a friend who says he's the best GM in Tucson, which is like his little joke. He's a pretty good GM. He probably is the best GM in Tucson. Who says that he will run certain games for burglars who linger too long in his house. And that is my goal for this. Is it's such an amazing deluxe item that a burglar would be like, "What is this?" And you're like, come out of bed, you're like, "Oh yeah, we could play. You want to play? Like we could play, right?"
It's really accessible.
It's really accessible, right? Exactly.
Amazing. Well, I've got one last question before we turn to maybe some quick questions. I'm going to ask you guys what you want to say that we didn't get to ask. And then it's very late in England. So we will try and get Hannah to bed before she falls asleep in front of us. This was asked, I think, almost as soon as I started the stream. I think it should get answered. P.S. Jirac asked, 1, can I get a Hellworm? 2, can I smooch a Hellworm? And 3, can I play as a Hellworm? So if we have any thoughts, I hate to, again, no lore spoilers, but if you just have any thoughts on that real quick.
Get a Hellworm. Like I'm gonna take this very silly question very seriously. Get a Hellworm sounds like a perfectly nice like main ambition for your campaign. What are you gonna do with it? Like, I don't know. God bless, have fun. Can you kiss the Hellworm? Like, brother, that's between you and the Hellworm. Can you play as a Hellworm? Yeah, okay, you're entering into the realm of like homebrew, I think. I think that like we're being cagey about like which non-human characters like we're really gonna mechanically support. I think Hellworm is out. I'm not gonna I think that's like when you're the size of a school bus, like it's a bit too disruptive to the campaign.
Yeah, I mean that plays to, I think that one of our big jobs as designers is to find the moments of tolerance, right? Like you cannot play as a character the size of a school bus and kind of participate with everybody else in the same kind of scenes. You can play as 4 sentient rats. That's cool. Like that's fine. That works, right? And so figuring out that box and saying what's outside of it. Now, if you're a Hellworm that's been trapped inside a human body, which is a skin suit that you were poured into against your will and bound up with string that you yourself cannot untie, okay, now we're talking. Like we can make that work, right? And figuring out how to make it work is kind of our job for the TTRPG. And a part of that is, well, how far can we stretch to make it work? And you, of course, are always welcome to stretch whatever you want. But yeah, I mean, I think smooching is pretty essential to most of our games. Brendan, I don't know if you have any thoughts on smooching the Hellworm.
Now we're pro smooching. We considered calling the new system D-smooch.
D-smooch.
Yeah.
D-smooch.
There it is. Now, is that for dice rolling or is that undoing smooching? We'll never know. You have to get the game to find out. So many people have asked so many incredible questions, and I have tried to get a good list of them. And Hannah, I will, of course, send you the questions later so that you can be sure to maybe answer some in newsletters that people can subscribe to if they want to learn more. We've had all the info for where you can find Failbetter, where you can find Magpie, me if you want to. If you're interested in the histories of computing and where it and intersects with the rise of capitalism and the platformized internet and whatever it may be, give me a call.
And speedrunning.
Oh, that's so... Hannah, you're such a marketing communications director. That's so true. I'm currently working on... They keep pulling me back in. I'm currently working on a book called Any Percent, A History of Speedrunning, which is also in a non-Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign space right now. So if speedrunning interests you at all, I would love to see someone speedrunning Fallen London. What does that look like?
There is a speedrun of Sunless Sea. You can complete Sunless Sea in something like 20 seconds. You literally just don't even leave the port. You just sell everything you own and quit.
It's the radical acceptance run. But before we sort of close out, I would love to kind of go maybe round robin and ask folks, like, what is something that you want to be sure that people know, or an answer to a question that we didn't get to, or a question that you would have asked you if you could have. So Bruno disappeared, but we'll be back, I'm sure. So we can... Oh, hey, Bruno. Great. Yeah, we could start with Bruno and then go...
I'm back? Okay. I'm not actually getting my own video, but...
We can hear you from the beyond. So let's get from you first, and then we'll go to...
This is fine. Like, what's on the inside now is on the outside. Just, the dark void has consumed.
Bruno, do you want to tell us about something that maybe you want to be sure folks know? Or is it just the abyss? Because that's fine too.
It's just the abyss. I think I've covered everything.
Great. Mark, Brendan?
I mean, I think for me, the number one is like we get a lot of questions about how much are we going to use the systems of Fallen London's, like Scandal and other things like that. And the answer is as much as we can. Like, we want those to be very complementary experiences. Obviously, some of the things we're doing are outside of that, but like, I really want to make sure that people understand, like, this is not us grabbing the Fallen London IP and like doing something radically different. It's really trying to build on what's there, including those stats and other ways of representing things.
For me, I kind of wanted to circle back to, I mentioned the idea of principals, these NPCs who are the leaders of your concern. They are people of power and importance who bring resources to it, but also put demands upon you. And so one of the cool things that we're going to be doing for that is providing, a list of existing NPCs who make a good fit as the principals for different concerns. But one of the other fun things that we're going to try to do is provide a way for you to convert your existing Fallen London character into a principal for your tabletop game, so that you can have your character be the one who's causing all the problems for your character.
I think Side Reel Secrets in chat has summed it up. They just said, yo! So, target reached. Hannah?
Yes.
What do you want me to know?
Oh gosh, I think it was lovely. Somebody said it's really nice to see how excited everybody is about this. And that is like, this isn't guff. Like, we are fundamentally extremely excited to be doing this. And not just in like a finally sense, just like, I don't know if it's obvious, but pretty much everybody at Failbetter is a TTRPG player, enjoyer of TTRPGs. Every single writer has already had like a hand on the ball in terms of reading everything that's coming through from Magpie. We're sending feedback and really just bubbling away with the joy over this and how exciting it is for us to work on something like this, which, as Bruno has said, puts a new lens on Fallen London itself for us. It is difficult to perpetually create something. The way that we run Fallen London, running a service game is really hard, and we relish the opportunity to think about the world in a new way. And while there's no likelihood necessarily that things directly will come back into Fallen London from the TTRPG, it's giving us like gas for working on Fallen London itself. And the thing to recall for us is that the birthday itself is the 11th of January. And you should keep your ears and eyes peeled, which is if you think about that literally, it's a very Fallen London thing to do. I will have some kind of treats and joy for you around that birthday. So it's going to be, as my brother both have said, it's going to be quite a big year next year. Not to mention, we're also working on an entirely other new game in a new universe and a new genre that we haven't even announced yet, and we've been working on since 2020. So, big year. And can't wait. Just can't wait.
Exceptional. I am so excited for y'all. And well-timed that Bruno is now stuck in the abyss. So I think that's a great place for us to leave it today. Again, please be sure it's no joke when I say that Failbetter, I hold y'all in the highest regard. You're one of my favorite game studios, not just because of the product that you make, but because of the people who make them, and have been for the past like 10 years now. And I'm just so thrilled to be able to shine a light on your work. And I'm so excited to see what you guys are cooking up with Magpie. And for all the TTRPG nerds out there who will be lured into a trap with sigils and frights and bring the burglars along and the 4 rats in a trench coat. Thank you guys so much. And I mean, do you want to say just a final farewell to anyone out there watching or listening?
Well, I mean, first, thank you.
Everyone.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
yeah.
you, Kat. Like, we really appreciate it. Like, it's been great to have you as a
Thank you.
host, and it feels so fitting to have an academic / games / speedrunning / awesome streamer person. It's very Fallen London-esque to be like, how many things do you do? All of them, right? Like, so we're hey, Bruno
Bruno came
There
back!
it says the finale.
It's
Yay.
good. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you,
thanks to everybody in the
chat.
chat. Like, we really appreciate your questions and excitement, and nothing makes us happier than making stuff. And as Hannah said, it takes a long time, but when it's done, we really take so much joy in your joy. So really excited to see people so excited already.
Perfect. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.